Boa tarde. Estou muito feliz de estar aqui. Amo Campus Party. E amo Brazil. I've been to Brazil probably 15 times, and I'm very happy to be here on this occasion for a new reason. My son Alex is going to be a keynote speaker on this stage tomorrow. Alex, stand up, please. Yeah. I used to be a very famous author, and he's now a very famous author today. So, um, I'm going to talk to you about a very difficult topic today. The digital age is full of opportunity, as you all know, and this new technology promises many, many wonderful things and many, many miracles. But unfortunately, it comes with a number of very deep problems in society. And you've self-selected to come to this session to learn about this. That means that you here are people who care about the future of the world, about the future of Brazil, and about the future for you and your families. And it's falling upon your generation to fix these problems, not mine. So I'm sorry, the world that my generation is leaving you is deeply, deeply troubled. It's unsustainable, it's too unjust, it's too conflicted, and history is calling forth your generation to address these problems. So let me tell you how I came about this thought. I've written a number of books. I actually wrote a couple of books in the 1980s that nobody read. I think my mother bought most of those books. They were studies in bad timing. But I started writing bestsellers in the early 1990s. Paradigm Shift, which was obviously a big book. And I wrote the first bestseller about the web. It was called The Digital Economy. And 20 years later, my publisher asked me to write the anniversary edition of the book. So I had to go and read the book again. And the book held up very well, but there were some very interesting things that I discovered. The internet did create many, many wonderful things. And I concluded that we're entering a second era of the digital age, where we have extraordinary technologies like you're working on here at Campus Party. And the key technologies of these new age could be called Web 3. And Alex will explain that to you tomorrow. I'm not going to go into that today, other than to say we have AI, the Internet of Things, billions and trillions of physical objects that become smart, they become communicating, and they learn to do transactions. The virtual metaverse, the virtual worlds, extended reality, and the foundational technology we believe for all of these is the underlying technology of cryptocurrencies, blockchain. You know this word, blockchain? Okay. As Alex will explain tomorrow, for 40 years, we've had an internet of information. But with blockchain, we're getting an internet of value, where anything of value, any asset, from money to a stock or a bond or security or a piece of art or the data in your identity or intellectual property or music or a vote. A vote is an asset. Assets can be managed, stored, transacted in a secure way, peer-to-peer. And this was a very exciting revelation. However, the book in 1994 also discussed something I called the dark side, things that could go wrong. And I talked about a number of things that could go wrong, and they all have gone wrong. Let me explain. 6 problems. The first is that the data that all of you create, the virtual you, is a mirror image of you. You create this data, but it gets taken away from you by large technology companies and by governments. And that's a big problem. And I'll explain why. Secondly, the digital age was supposed to bring prosperity, right? But if you look at the data, what's happened is that the economies around the world are growing, but the middle class is shrinking. We have wealth creation, but we have a bifurcation of wealth. The third problem is the internet was going to bring us all together, right? Well, it has in some ways. We have Wikipedia. We can all come look at the same information. Grandparents can communicate with their grandchildren now using video, a mobile device. However, overall, there's been a fragmentation in society where each of us ends up in our little self-reinforcing information silos or islands, echo chambers, and that's a big problem. A fourth problem is that I hope the internet and the web would improve democracy. I don't think there's anyone here who thinks that the internet has helped us create a better democracy. The opposite has happened. Unscrupulous people, populists, charlatans, have been able to, using the fragmentation of public discourse, do things that government shouldn't be doing. And they're not acting in our interests. And that's led to a crisis of legitimacy of democracy, where many people think, well, maybe democracy is not the best system. The fifth problem is that the internet, and it's a big problem for sure, as you can see from that. Thank you for that toot. The fifth problem is that the internet was going to help us improve the environment, right? But it's done a number of things, and it's been helpful in some ways, but overall it's contributed to globalization and outsourcing, which has resulted in this crisis of climate change that we have today. And this is a big problem. And the final problem, now with the rise of AI, how are we going to control AI as human beings? Because in your lifetime, 20 years from now, AIs will look at you as a human kind of the way that we look at a bug. They will be so infinitely more capability. How do we maintain what's called our human agency? So these are all big problems, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss each of these problems, and then I'm going to tell you, here are the current solutions proposed by government leaders to solve this problem. And then I'm going to tell you, no, there's a whole new approach that we could take. And my hope is that you will understand this new approach and find ways to implement this in your own lives coming ahead. Okay, problem number 1, data. The virtual you, I'm sorry, what is your name? Hike? Kaiki. The virtual Kaiki knows more about him than he does. in all kinds of areas. Because you can't remember where you were a year ago, this exact time, what you said, what transactions, what you bought, what medication you had, what you got on a test, what diagnosis you had, and so on. And all of this data creates a mirror image of you that's very, very valuable. But that data, you create it, but it gets expropriated. It gets taken away by a whole new class of companies called digital conglomerates. This is a new species of business. We've never seen anything like this. They take the data and they monetize it to become the wealthiest companies in the world. It means that you don't have access to that data to use it to plan your life. It means that the data is not secure and it's going to be hacked. There are two kinds of these big server clouds, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. And also, your privacy is being undermined. Now, people say to me, well, Don, privacy's dead. Get over it. What's your problem? You got nothing to hide. This is stupidity. Privacy is the foundation of freedom. And we need to get this data back so that we can manage it responsibly for ourselves and for our families and our own benefit. So how are we going to solve this problem? Well, there's a wonderful book by a Harvard professor called Shoshana Zuboff, and she describes the problem, especially around privacy, very brilliantly. But the main solutions that are being proposed is that we need governments to protect our privacy. Well, sure. I mean, there's a role for government, but that's necessary, but it's not sufficient. You don't need someone to protect your data. You need to own your data. And you can decide what to do with it. So this is a very exciting new thing. It's called a self-sovereign digital identity. It's enabled by AI and a blockchain. And as you travel through life, it's sweeping up all these digital crumbs of data that you leave into an identity that you own. You monetize. You decide, am I going to give my medical information anonymized to science? Am I going to get a second opinion on a medical test? And this is a very powerful idea, a self-sovereign identity. Now, what happens when you combine your data, the virtual you, with AI? Then you get a digital co-pilot for your life. You get your digital twin. There's you and your digital twin. And your digital twin is your partner. And it knows all about your medical record. It knows about your learning needs. It knows about your preferences. It knows I mean, you're dating, rather than swiping through, Tinder or something like that, your digital co-pilot goes and has 1,000 dates with other digital co-pilots, and then they come back to you with 3 recommendations on good people you should be dating. So that's kind of a funny example, but this is a very powerful concept. No, governments don't need to protect our data only. We need to own our data, combine that with AI. Now, this sounds like science fiction, right? In 5 months, Microsoft is releasing a product called Copilot. You won't go to ChatGPT, it's part of you. ChatGPT is part of your digital co-pilot. So this is very important. Number 2 problem. How can this be? This wonderful, amazing digital age But in many countries, especially in the developed world, like the United States, the economy is growing, but prosperity is declining. What a paradox. How is this possible? We now have more billionaires in the United States than was conceivable a long time ago. And 60% of the American population is living paycheck to paycheck. If they miss a paycheck, they're having difficulty feeding their family or paying their rent. So there's a second problem. In the digital economy, I said, I think that technology will bring new jobs. And it did for a while. But now, with the impact of all these technologies, we're going to see very soon massive structural unemployment. Think about it. In the United States, the #1 job type for men is truck driver in 48 states. Blockchain, AI, the Internet of Things, that one's gone in 10 years. The #1 job type will be gone. So what are we going to do when there's huge parts of the economy that cannot be employed in a traditional way? Well, the traditional approach is raise taxes. We should redistribute wealth. Redistribute wealth. Let me propose a new approach. And I mentioned this in my TED Talk. I don't know if any of you have seen my TED Talk. It's watched by many millions of people. Rather than redistribute wealth, let's pre-distribute wealth. Let's change the way that wealth gets created in the first place by having a more democratic and a more open economy. Now, how is this possible? Well, first of all, we could protect people's rights through blockchain records. Do you know that in Brazil, 70% of land titles are not enforceable? And that's a big problem, because if you don't have a valid title to your land, you can't borrow against it, you can't plan for the future. With blockchain, land titles can become immutable and nobody can change them. You know, in Honduras, a dictator came to power and he tried to steal people's land. He said, well, you may have a piece of paper that says you own that farm, but the government central computer says my friend owns your farm. Well, no one will be able to do that in the future. Have you heard this term, the sharing economy? Uber, right? Airbnb. This is not really sharing. In fact, Uber is successful precisely because they don't share, right? They build a platform. Drivers get paid okay. Why don't we eliminate these companies and just use the new technology to create a true Uber, a distributed Uber? And there's a new form of business that's very different than the traditional corporation. It's called a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. Have any of you heard the term DAO? Let the translation, yeah. Alex will talk about this tomorrow in some depth, so I'm not going to go into it. But these are companies that don't really have a corporate structure. They don't have a board of directors, and they don't have a CEO in the traditional sense. They're decentralized, and they create wealth in a very different way. That's exciting. We could end remittances. You know, I live in Toronto. We have a couple of 100,000 Brazilians in Toronto. When a Brazilian doctor sends some money to her mother in Recife, she gets charged typically like 10, 12%. This is $1 trillion the financial system is taking away from people who need that money. with this technology, you can send money around the world like an email, right? Email is for the Internet of Information. With blockchain, you can send value, like money, for $0. So this contributes to prosperity. So there are many other things. Imagine if you could monetize your data. Do you know there are 1.5 billion people in the world, according to a theorist, Jared Lanier, who says 1.5 billion people could double their income if they could sell their data. Extraordinary. So many things we can do to make the economy more decentralized and fair, rather than just taxing the rich. And sure, Elon Musk should pay taxes, okay? I'm not against taxing the rich. The third problem is I had hoped that the internet would bring us together. But when all is said and done, we've all ended up in these little self-reinforcing echo chambers where all you hear is your own point of view. Algorithms do this, and unscrupulous people promote this as well. I think for many people, the purpose of information today is not to inform them, it's to give them comfort for their preconceived views. This is leading to many problems in society. You know, and now that you add in AI, there are deep fakes now of leading Democrats in the United States saying things that they never said. How will we know the truth? How will we be informed as a society when the old ways of doing that are failing? The old ways of informing ourselves were newspapers, television, magazines. Those are disappearing, and we all get our news in different ways today. This is a big problem. And it's created a situation where a lot of people are living in an alternate reality. Do you know in the United States, it's one thing to say that you think the election was faked, the last election, which it wasn't. It was the most scrutinized election in American history. Every vote was counted like 10 times with lawyers and computer scientists and so on. It's one thing to think that. It's another thing to think the election was faked, vaccines are evil, scientists have a conspiracy to lie to us, climate change is a hoax, God has ordained certain leaders in our society. The big problem in America is immigrants and people who aren't white. That's called living in an alternate world where the facts are different from the facts in the real world. This is very dangerous. So what's the solution? Well, nobody's proposed one, really. I mean, individuals should inform themselves. I don't think that's going to work. Let's have a new approach. I think we need to have whole new models of media and of education for the 21st century. Now, each of these topics, of course, is a 2-hour lecture, and I can't go into depth unless you want to stay here for 16 more hours listening to me. I mean, we can do that if you want, but probably not. So what would that look like? New models of media and education. Well, the first thing, it's possible to know the truth through blockchain and AI. So if someone says, this scientist has created fake data, you can follow that trail of information right back to the source. You can know where it came from. It came from a little conspiracy think tank in Florida, funded by extremists. That's where that theory came from. You can know the truth with this technology. Now, knowing the truth is not everything. Lots of people know the truth, but they choose to ignore it and have a different view of reality. Number two, we need to protect freedom of speech, because if you don't have freedom of speech, then people are not free to share the truth and their own point of view. Have you heard of STEM? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEM. Sure, we need lots of STEM. Many of you will have careers in STEM. But if you're studying science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, I would encourage you to also study liberal arts and the humanities, because we not only need people with technical skills, we need people who can think and think critically and solve problems and have good bullshit detectors. Excuse my French, okay? We need people who are informed and who have a passion for doing the right thing. So rather than science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, okay? From STEM to STEAM. We need to have media literacy programs. Every kid in grade 1 on should be studying media literacy. Sorry, my phone is ringing here. Sorry, I can't take this call right now. I'm busy. Okay, thank you. Excuse me. I was worried it was my wife, but it's not. Whew, that's close. I have a 6-year-old granddaughter. I know it's shocking to think of me as a grandfather, but I have a 6-year-old granddaughter. In grade 1, she has media literacy program and training. The first part of the first year, she's learning about advertising. What are advertisers trying to achieve? And every year they're going to have media literacy in this school. We should do this in every school. And of course, we do need to protect our privacy, because if you don't have the right to be anonymous, you also don't have the right to say things privately to people. So that's a big issue. Next thing, we have a crisis of legitimacy of government. Trust in government all around the world is at an all-time low. How can this be? We have great technology and transparency and so on. Well, and then we have all these populist politicians. Some of them even say that they think Hitler was a good idea, and fascism is a kind of interesting system. Well, this is a big, big problem, and it's leading to a real crisis of people's trust in government. You know where all this started? It started with a couple of well-meaning people, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in England. And they had this view that the best government is no government. Well, we all want inexpensive government, but this view is fundamentally wrong. We need good government, trustworthy government, governments that act in the interests of people, not in the interests of the big corporations that put them into power. Do you know in the United States, 90% of people think there should be background checks for firearm purchases? Reasonable thing? 90%. But Congress can't pass a law because the politicians in the US Congress are not responsible to the voters and the citizens. They're responsible to the big funders that put them into power, the National Rifle Association. Do you know the idea of legitimacy? Legitimacy is the idea that you may disagree with the people in the government, but you think that the system, democracy, is the best system. Well, there are many people today who think democracy is not the best system. That maybe we should have a strong man leader, or maybe we should have anarchy, or maybe we should go back to, Soviet-style Bolshevism and communism, or maybe we should, there are many, many different approaches. And this is very dangerous to society. And in Brazil, you've seen your share of turmoil and polarization over these things. How are we going to fix democracy? Another little problem. Well, nobody's really got a great idea. You know what? I think that we need to go beyond tinkering. We can't change little things. We need a new model of democracy for the digital age. The first wave of democracy, we created representative institutions, right? You could vote for a representative. But citizens were inert. You vote once every 4 years and then you're passive. There's opacity. You don't really know what government leaders are doing. And there's also, governments are beholden, they're responsible to big, powerful interests. A second era could be a true democracy, where you have a culture of public deliberation. You're active, where there's informed citizenry and transparency, and where representatives are responsible to citizens. Now, how's that possible? When you vote, the representative just goes and does whatever they want to do, right? How could we have accountability? Well, this technology can help us deliver that. Who here has heard of a smart contract? Smart contract? This is some smart contract, okay. This is something enabled by blockchains. It's basically a contract made of software. And the contract polices itself. And when you do certain things, the contract releases money or other things. Why don't we have smart votes? Rather than just voting for the representative, you vote for their program as part of a smart contract. So you pick off, whoever and their program. And then when they become elected, they have to abide by the contract or else things happen. Maybe they don't get paid. Maybe they get censured. Maybe they are removed from office for violating the smart contract. So that's one of many things that we could do. I don't have time to go into it. To build a whole new model of democracy for the digital age. Okay, we're almost there. Is there anyone here who thinks climate change isn't a big problem? I spent a lot of time with many of the leading scientists in the world at Davos in the World Economic Forum. We have a big problem here. And it's not just that water levels, and it's caused by human activity. Every scientist in the world who studied this believes that, except 3 scientists who work for big oil companies in the United States, but everybody else. In the next 10 years, 2 billion people are going to lose their water supply. I was just in Namibia on a vacation in Africa. There's a drought now in Namibia where they've lost their water supply and the citizens are starving, and the government has authorized the killing of animals like elephants to feed the population. That's what it's come down to. So this is a huge problem. And it's people say it's an existential problem. Do you know what that means, existential? It means the existence of human beings on this planet will be determined by what we do in the next 10 and 20 years. So how are we going to solve that one? Well, the current approach is that we need to change behavior through carbon credits, taxing carbon, right? Everybody knows about a carbon credit. They're a good idea, don't get me wrong, but I think we need to do a lot more. We need to mobilize planet Earth and every human on it. Now, we've been mobilized before around world wars, World War I, World War II, but we were on different sides. We need the whole planet, every company, every little company, every federal government, every state government, every city, every mayor, every university, every school, every family, every kid in every schoolyard, every programmer taking action to solve this problem. Thankfully, we have some extraordinary new technologies that can help us achieve that. So, through blockchain and through AI, we can use this technology to mobilize communities, kind of like is being done here at Campus Party. But there's also something very important that's happening, and you'll remember this. It's called DMRV. DMRV. And it's the digital measurement, reporting, and valuation of carbon credits. So our carbon credit has a life. It gets created by somebody, and then it moves through the creation of a product, and the product gets sold, and the product gets used, and then the product gets exchanged again, and then eventually the product is retired. With this technology, we can now track the life of a carbon credit as it moves through all of this. And if you take a picture of this screen, there's a company called Tolum that's working with a blockchain, Hedera, and a company called Atma. And they enable a supply chain to track every little activity in the supply chain. This is an extraordinary thing and can give us not just transparency into the fight against climate change, can give us new tools to know everything so that we can fight it more effectively. And the reality is what's called a net zero economy. We need to create this, not just in your lifetime, but probably in my lifetime, if I live long enough, where every piece of, every little bit of carbon that's initiated is also offset by a carbon credit, and where we have a truly green economy that moves away from fossil fuels. This is one of the historic challenges of your generation. And the final one is AI. So lots of people are excited about AI, but lots of people are very worried as well. And you've seen all the news. It's going to create structural unemployment. Probably is. AIs are going to become so smart that human beings will lose control. A really big one is AI soldiers in the military. I don't know if you've seen these things. They're pretty terrifying. They're like dogs or human beings that are made of technology, and they run around, and they're pretty good shot. And they're lethal killing machines. So what are we going to do to make sure this doesn't get out of control? This is a challenge of your generation. Well, the old solution is to do nothing, that the big technology companies will make sure that nothing happens. And you should all trust Mark Zuckerberg and trust all of the leaders of these big companies. There's a new approach that I think we need a new paradigm for amplifying human potential making us smarter, while at the same time protecting what it is to be a human and protecting our agency. That's the term, our ability to control our own destiny. One thing we're going to have to do, this is a big job, those of you who are programmers, I think we need a new model of AI. All these centralized AI systems are terrifying. We need to decentralize AI. We need to decentralize AI. How can we do that? Well, the hardware. Every one of you owns a computer, and they could be part of a massive AI cloud. We have the software to do that. At the foundational models, the natural language models and so on, they should be open source. We should have transparency into them. You know, in the physical world, if I let go of this device, I'm going to give you a choice. You can vote. What's it going to do? Is it going to drop? Is it going to go up? Is it going to go off to the side? Or is it going to go around in a circly way and then eventually go into the sky? Well, everyone here knows it's going to drop because we know the rules and the algorithms of the physical world. It's called gravity, right? We all know about gravity. In these new worlds, we have no idea. What are the laws? What are the rules? What are the foundational models? They should be open source. There should be full transparency and accountability that if an algorithm is injurious to people, if it's hurting people, it needs to be changed. It's not that hard. How about the data? I don't think Google should own your data, as I've already said. I think you should own your data. And we should have decentralized governance of data. There should be attestation. Someone creates data, you should get to know who created it. And you should receive value for data that you create. At the level of applications on this new blockchain-enabled system, they should be self-auditing, and we should have smart contracts so that there's accountability. A smart contract has rules. It has a little policeman in the contract. It has a bank in the contract that can execute payments. That's a new model of AI. Okay, so you've been very patient, and I know that English is not the first language for most of you. But these are 6 historic challenges of the digital age. And for each one, I presented an old solution, an old way of solving that problem. We need governments to protect our privacy. We should redistribute wealth through taxation. Individuals, it's your problem to inform yourself. Yeah, we need to fix democracy. Government leaders should behave better. States need to change behavior to protect climate change. We need states to tax carbon. And we should allow technology companies to do whatever they want to do. 6 new approaches. On data, you should have a self-sovereign identity and a digital co-pilot. And it's not controlled by Microsoft, it's controlled by you. We need to solve the problem of prosperity rather than just taxing the rich, which we should do. We need to change the way the economy works. And you'll hear about DAOs tomorrow, decentralized autonomous organizations, from Alex Tapscott on this same stage. We need new models of media and education. We need critical thinkers in society, and we need to know how to verify facts, and we need to all take responsibility to inform ourselves as citizens when the old ways of doing that are collapsing. And I was talking to a 16-year-old a while back, and she said, I don't read the newspaper. If the news is important, it will find me on TikTok or on, Instagram. This is not a good approach. All of you every day should go to a reliable source and read the news and read an entire article. You ever done that? A whole article from beginning all the way to the end to inform yourselves. This is your responsibility to do that. We need to mobilize the world to fight climate change and use this technology of DMRV to track how it's going. And sure, AI is a wonderful thing, but let's control it by decentralizing the entire model of AI. You might want to take a photograph of this screen. These are 2 books. They are very good books. Thank you for applauding. This is Alex Tapscott, Web3. Wall Street Journal, bestseller, fantastic book, and it's just been translated in Brazil into Portuguese, so you can get this book. And this is another Tapscott, my brother, Bob, who wrote a book called Trivergence. AI, blockchain, the Internet of Things, triverging together. These are great ways. That's the first thing you can do, inform yourself. Whoops. The second thing you can do, fight for governments and government leaders that have this new perspective and not the old, tired ways. Number 3, get together in your community. Here at Campus Party, meet with some people, talk about these problems. How are we going to solve them? Number 4, get involved in the issue of climate change. Take responsibility. Number 5, President Lula should meet with me tomorrow, and I'll explain a new approach with him. Now, I often do this. If I go to a country, I meet with the leader of the country to try and wake them up. I was in a Mideast country, and a government leader in the audience says, "What should we be doing as governments?" And I found myself saying, well, the first thing is you have to wake up. And then I thought, oh dear, I didn't just say that, did I? Anyway. And finally, when you have a new paradigm, that's what I'm talking about. A paradigm is a mental model. And paradigms put boundaries around what we think. They constrain our actions. They're often based on assumptions that are so strong that we don't know that they're there. Do you know paradigm? Here's a paradigm. The Earth is at the center of the universe. That was a paradigm for thousands of years. And then Galileo came along, and he said, no, the Earth rotates around the sun. Now, when you have a new paradigm, leaders of the old have great difficulty embracing the new. Galileo had a tough life. Einstein, the leaders of Newtonian physics fought against Einstein's general theory of relativity. And I'll bet you many of you already know what it's like to be received with coolness or hostility when you introduce a new idea. Because you're here at Campus Party, you're creating new ideas, new businesses. So, how is Brazil going to find leadership for change? How will your company find leadership for change? Well, I'll tell you to close, leadership can come from anywhere. This is what I found. A head of state, that's rare. CEO, sometimes. I documented a story of a clerical secretary who is the leading person in the transformation of a division of one of the biggest banks in the world. And she had what it took to be a leader. See, because the person at the top can't learn for the organization as a whole. Things are too complicated, and they're changing too fast. That means leadership is your personal opportunity. It's not your boss's opportunity. It's not, President Da Silva's opportunity. It's not the person sitting next to you. It's your personal opportunity if you will it. Now, I'd like to end with a little video that makes that point. You see, my organization, we've been studying people and organizations for decades. But recently, we're also studying nature. And I'm going to show you something today. It's called a murmuration. This is a word in the English dictionary. Bees come in swarms. Fish come in schools. Starlings, in many places of the world, come in something called a murmuration. And the murmuration refers to the murmuring of the wings of the birds. And the starlings are out over a 20-kilometer radius throughout the day. Oh no, the video stopped. Wouldn't you know it? We're going to take a little technical break here. Throughout the day, they're foraging for food, and at night, they come together and they create this spectacular thing. Now, the murmuration has a function. It's not just for show. See that on the right there? That's a hawk, 25 times the size of a starling, being chased away by the collective power of the little birds. And scientists that have studied this say they've never seen an accident. And there's leadership, but there's no one leader. And when the moment is right, this magic happens. Now, I'm telling you this because it has a lesson. The murmuration functions according to the principles that I have just outlined to you today. You remember I talk about decentralization? There's no boss. There's no middleman. There's leadership, but there's no one leader. The murmuration functions according to the principle of interdependence. You know, interdependence? The idea that we are all connected to each other. And a little bird functions as if its interest is connected to the interests of the murmuration as a whole. And finally, the murmuration has what I would call a great integrity. Integrity is about doing the right thing. And that's the foundation of trust. All of you want to build trust in your world and in your businesses and in your relationships. Well, what is trust? What is trust? I wrote a book about this. It took me 3 months to write one sentence. Okay, you ready? Here it comes. Trust is the expectation that the other party will act with integrity. Trust is the expectation that the other party will do the right thing. They'll be honest. They'll care about you. They'll abide by their commitments. Which is why a little tiny bird will chase after a hawk, a killer, a predator 25 times its size, because it knows that the other birds will do the right thing, that they will have its back. I look at this video and I get a lot of hope, and I look at you and I get a lot of hope too, that maybe this smaller, smarter, more decentralized world that your children and your grandchildren inherit might actually be a better one. So I wish you the very best. Thank you so much.
Alô, alô? Pronto. Thank you so much for the lecture. It's wonderful. It's much. Foi muito boa a palestra, assim, conhecimentos vastos, vistos de uma perspectiva muito legal. Foi incrível. Muito obrigada.
Companheiros.